Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming today. My name is Beth Wasden. I am the Deputy Director at Nanticoke Watershed Alliance, and I am really stoked to be talking about magical meadows and how you can convert that boring carpet of green into a bountiful beauty. So before I get into meadows, briefly, for those of you who are not familiar with Nanticoke Watershed Alliance, we are a small nonprofit and our mission is to conserve the natural, cultural, and recreational resources of the Nanticoke River watershed. Through that end, we have a number of programs and outreach efforts, but tied to what I'm talking to today is our residential plantings for people and pollinators program, which is a cost share program with homeowners in the Nanticoke River watershed. And we put in a lot of different conservation landscaping practices, including meadow conversions, but also pollinator gardens, designer ditches, tree plantings, rain barrels, designer ditches, etc. Go ahead. So why a meadow? Why would you even want to consider it? First of all, after that site prep is done, after that first year maintenance is taken care of, caring for your meadow is cheaper and easier to maintain than a lawn. You're going to have fewer emissions, obviously, because you're not going to be out there mowing constantly. Needless to say, you're going to have a lot of biodiversity depending on your seed mix. That's going to reflect in what is drawn into your meadow, and you have a lot of control because you're the one choosing the seed mix. Also, which is really great in the Nanticoke River watershed and elsewhere, is a meadow is going to store nitrogen and also carbon a lot more than a lawn. We have a lot of nitrogen, we have excessive nitrogen in the Nanticoke River watershed, so whatever we can do to have plants to uptake and to store nitrogen, that's all the better. Next, if you're like me, you like learning. Every day is an opportunity to learn something new. I guarantee you, you put in a meadow, it's every day you just go outside. You don't even need to do a field trip somewhere. You just go outside and there's something that you can learn. And that leads to the next thing. It's sports season entertainment. No matter what time of the year, there's something to be seen in your meadow. It is a real treasure. It is a great way to learn, but just to be an experience. Lastly, if you're really into certain things, monarchs are kind of the gateway, but there are a lot of different insects that need your help, such as native bees, for example. There are a lot of other butterflies and moths that also need host plants. And of course, a lot of us also like our songbirds and also migratory birds. You can target all of those cool critters with your seed mix, and that's a choice that you make. So there are different considerations that you need to make before you even start looking at all of those cool seed mixes and possibilities. We need to know, is a meadow right for the site? And is it the right time? Maybe it's just not a good time. So first of all, this is really, really important. And I know we're talking about lawn to meadow. So the implication is you've been out there mowing regularly, but maybe you bought a property and there's an old field and maybe it wasn't mowed so regularly, but you really need to know what was going on with the site and how much of a weed seed bed you have in that soil. Because if you have a lot of seeds in the soil, you're going to have to do more extensive site prep. Site prep is crucial. I'm going to say this a couple of times. It's going to determine how successful or aggravating your project is. And we want it to be a successful project. Next, and this is related to mowing, do you see invasive plants in the lawn? Because we really need to get those under control before we put in a meadow. Is the soil boggy or well draining? This isn't to say that you can't put in a wet meadow, but it makes things a little bit trickier. And I say that having sowed a wet meadow and gone in, you know, to my shin, I tell you, it's a lot more difficult. There are different considerations that you have to take into account if it's a really wet area. Having said that, it's been so dry lately, this late autumn, if you're prepped, it would be a good time to sow a wet area. How large is the area? Is it really reasonable for me to prep the area the way it needs to be prepped, and then for me to do the seeding and the maintenance? Or am I just going to be really overwhelmed and then just neglect the area? And again, we want a successful project. So I always recommend that people do bite-sized chunks. You can always add to your meadow after you have a successful first project. So we're going to be talking about some different site prep options, but you also need, you know what your values are. And when you look at the options, you need to determine, do I have some philosophical differences with any of these site prep options? Because some of them are more appropriate for large areas, so maybe that would make your project smaller if, say, you don't want to use an herbicide. Lastly, how much time do I have to prep? And are you planning on doing an autumn sowing, or do you want to sow in the spring? Pros and cons, but of course, that's going to impact your prep. Go ahead. So site prep. Again, site prep, that's going to determine whether your project is successful or not. Larger areas. First technique you can use is called the triple till. And that means you're going to till 3 times over about a 3.5 month period. If it's just a lawn and you don't have an extensive seed bank in the soil, triple till is great. If you do have extensive weed seeds in the soil, you're probably going to need to look at herbicide use or use herbicide in conjunction with the triple till and to do a longer prep. For a smaller area, you have some additional choices. You can solarize, and that's where you use painter's plastic, clear painter's plastic on the soil. You have to be ruthless. You're going to get out there with your mower, your trimmer, you're going to buzz cut it, really scalp it. You're going to saturate it with water, put that painter's plastic on top. You're going to leave it there for about 4 to 6 weeks. And this needs to be done in the high summer when the soil temperature is warm. We have abundant sunlight. You're not going to do that this time of the year. You're going to pull it up after about 6 weeks, leave it exposed for a month, and do the same thing. Buzz cut, saturate with moisture, cover it again for another month, month and a half, and that should bake everything. You can remove lawn with a sod cutter. That is very hard work. So if, again, that's a smaller area where you would do that. And the last option as well is hard work, using hand tools to remove turf. The first 3 are, to me, the more practical options. Next, plugs or seeds. So you have your area, you've started prepping, you really need to start thinking about, hey, am I going to sow seeds, which is much cheaper, but takes longer for those plants to mature? Or, hey, am I into instant gratification? I got some deep pockets and I'm going to put some plugs in. You can also do a mixture, especially if there is a species that you really, really want in your meadow. It's not included in your seed mix. Hey, just get a tray of whatever that species is, and you can just plug in, and then you get a mixture of instant gratification and a cheaper project cost. So plugs, they are great in another way as well. A nativar, which is just a native plant cultivar. There are many of them and more of them. Some of them are not so great because they change the structure of the flower. Pollinators can't use them, or even the color of the plants, and pollinators don't recognize them as being a host plant anymore. That's a problem. However, there are some great nativars where it just shrinks. Honey, I shrunk the native plant, right? And so if you live somewhere, especially where somebody, I love Joe Pye, one of my favorite, but you know, maybe you can't do the 6-foot plus plant in your neighborhood, but you could do something that's a foot, 2 foot tall. There are some great nativars, including there's baby Joe now, that's only a foot and a half tall, great in a container as well. So you can include things like that if you decide to go with plugs. With seeds, you're really not going to have that option, but there are an abundant curated mixes from some great companies. And you can actually say Ernst, for example, you can go to Ernst's website, you can type in pollinator, and it's going to pull up all of the mixes that they have that are geared toward pollinators. You can also bless the people at Ernst. They're very patient and they are very, very knowledgeable. They'll do all the hard work. You tell them the square footage and you tell them, hey, I would like to do a mixture of multiple mixes. How many pounds of each do I need? And they will break that down for you. And also tell you how much cover crop you need as well. So fabulous people at Ernst, but Prairie Moon, they are based out of Minnesota, right? So their climate is a lot different than ours, something to take into consideration, but they do have some shady mixes, which can be really hard to find. So if you're looking to do a native plant sowing in a shady area, they're a good place to consider. Pinelands Nursery, which is in New Jersey, they also offer seed mixes. Both Ernst and Pinelands do ecotypes, and basically they're just telling you where they sourced the seed. For retail, and I guess I didn't put Sussex Conservation District, but people can still order from y'all, right?
Yep, I think we did take our plants offline because I think they've gone dormant with the cold, so people would be getting a dormant plant
Gotcha.
this time, but
But
it
in
will
the
open back
spring.
up in the spring. Yeah,
There you go. So, and very, very reasonable prices when you order from Sussex Conservation District as well. Isel Plants is a co-op that works with a lot of different wholesale nurseries. So it's not as cheap as wholesale, but it's cheaper than, say, going to a retail outlet and buying a tray of plants, if you could even get that. Environmental Concern over in St. Michael's, they have seasonal retail opportunities and sell plugs. You can also partner with a fabulous organization like the Nanticoke Watershed Alliance, if you're in the Nanticoke River watershed, in order to get the plugs cost share or the seeds cost share. So when you're choosing or making your own meadow mix, basics apply just as if you were putting in a garden. What's your soil condition? Is it dry, average, moist, wet? How much light do you get during the growing season? Not now, but if you think back in July, how much light were you getting? Is it full sun, part sun, or shade? And again, for a meadow, for the most part, you really need at least a part shade conditions in order to be able to really plant a meadow. You can plant some other things in shady areas, but technically it's not really a meadow. You're a lot more limited. Instant gratification. So along with plugs, if you go to Ernst again, for example, they have a mix, the butterfly and hummingbird mix, that has things that aren't native, but they're annual. So say like poppies and cornflowers, all of these, you know, really happy little plants that will satisfy you and pollinators the first year. But keep in mind, you will have to mow the first season a couple of times. People get very precious about their pretty poppies. I get it, they're gorgeous. But you can have a flower cutting party with some of your friends before you do that first mow. How important is ecotype to you? So again, where those seeds are from. And to me, it should have some importance because the closer those seeds are to our climate here on the Delmarva, the more success you're going to have with your sowing. Are there any must-have plants that are not included in that mix? Again, I can tell you with Ernst, and I'm sure it's the case with Pinelands as well, if you say, hey, I really want to make sure that I get the species included, they will make sure that you get what you need. Do you want to build an ultra niche meadow mix? You can completely do that. Say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm providing for specialist solitary bees. You can do that. Hey, I want to make sure I have a butterfly moth host meadow. Go for it. But you will need to do your research and take your time and make sure you pick some suitable plants. And always, always include grasses. Very, very important. Not just providing nice seed heads. I mean, grasses are gorgeous, in my opinion. Talk about winter structure, something that winter interest, grasses always give it. But they also have really awesome seed heads for songbirds and all kind of critters as it gets cold. And they provide cover for insects at the base to go into during the winter time. So very, very valuable. If you order from Ernst, I can tell you, they're not gonna let you forget your cover crop, but make sure you don't forget your cover crop. You want something to get established and start growing to stabilize that area. You don't want erosion. Sowing your meadow, it's very simple. After a lot of experience, I actually prefer to hand sow. So I'll just mix things up in a bucket and go out and I'm doing the scattering. If you have chickens, it's really easy. It's like you're throwing out the scratch for the chickens, right? But you're doing it a lot of scratch. And you are just following this basic pattern. You're gonna do an up and down and side to side pattern. I recommend that you split your seeds at least into a half, but I like to do quarters because you don't want to get to this point and realize that you know, you've used all of your seed that you had allocated for the up and down. You split it into quarters, you get to this point, you know you need to cover this other area. You can also mix your seeds with sand, kitty litter. Some people have some kind of coloration so that they know, hey, I can see it with my eyeball that I've actually sowed here. I usually don't do that. I find that it's pretty easy. You can actually see at least some of the seed. With a spreader, by the way, the reason why that is more of an issue is because these seeds are all different sizes. And so it's not like you're just putting out one uniform seed type. And so with the spreader, some of the seeds will just, you know, like they're gone in 10 seconds and then the others take longer. So that's why the hand sowing is a lot easier. After you have seeded the full area, you've done your up and down, side to side, all of your seeds are gone. You're gonna need to use a roller. You can stomp, you can use a small garden tractor. I've seen some people use ATVs to just roll over the seeds, but you're making sure that the seed gets into good contact with that soil. That's what we want. Lastly, you need to make sure you get easy straw, which is available at your favorite big box store. And it has tack gum in it, so it is going to adhere to the soil. You want to lightly scatter that. Do not do a deep mulch. You're just doing a very light scattering. And then you should see your cover crop emerge in 4 to 6 weeks.
Did have one question in the chat here.
Sure.
It says, any experience or thoughts on cold treatment of seed and its impact on germination?
That's why I like to do autumn seedings. Okay. Is because a lot of our native plants, they have some kind of cold stratification period that's required. So temperatures that are less than 40 degrees Fahrenheit. If you do a spring seeding, then yeah, you're gonna have to do a pre-treat Or you're gonna have to understand, some of these plants won't be able to germinate until next year. And how much of that seed is actually gonna survive critters over a year. So I'm a big fan, actually, this time of the year and into December, to me, is the best time to sow. So first year maintenance is the most intensive. You do need to mow 3 to 4 times that first season. Again, we all love, and even that, the cover crop, the rye, it turns this really pretty silver color. And you might be enjoying that in June, but I'm telling you, it is time to mow. And we need to mow that first time at about 6 to 8 inches. That's gonna cut back anything that we don't want growing in the meadow. Most of our native plants, they're gonna be putting their energy in their roots the first year. They're not gonna get taller than 6 to 8 inches. Some of your native plants, you're not even gonna see until the 3rd year. Did I say you need to be patient with meadows? Because you do, but you should also look at that as a surprise. What will I see this year that I did not see last year or the first year? So get out there, cut what you need to. Like I said, have a flower cutting party with some friends, and then you need to mow. And you need to do that 3 to 4 times during the growing season to control things that you do not want to take over your meadow. And so not only are we looking at invasives, but if you have an aggressive native like a ragweed, you do not want that taking over your meadow. So you need to be willing, either be knowledgeable about plants or be willing to go out with your cell phone, take pictures, use iNaturalist. There are a lot of great free tools to help you identify things, to make a determination of, is this good or bad? But I will tell you, usually if you see a big monoculture of whatever it is, you probably don't want it because it's showing you what it's going to do. After that, it gets a lot easier. You're always going to keep an eye open for invasive plants. Any sort of thuggish, aggressive plant, you have to be willing to buzz cut that, mow it down, get rid of it. You need to mow once a year. Really recommend that you do that in April. You may have seen the memes on social media, you know, wait until it's 50 degrees. Well, that's great for some insects, but our friend the leafcutter bee, it's not going to come out until it's 70 degrees. It's, you know, those ladies, they like some warm temperatures, you know, 50 degrees ain't going to cut it. So what you have to remember is that there's no perfect time to mow, but by mowing in April, you are giving a lot of critters a chance to emerge. What you can do is, if you are on the ball, your meadow looks great in year 4. You've been doing all of those things. You've been making sure that invasive plants aren't coming up. You don't see trees and shrubs coming up. And if you're willing to continue to stay on top of things, you can split your meadow into thirds, and you can mow a third of your meadow each year, and you'll rotate. And that way, every 3 years, the meadow will be mowed. And that way, our friends like leafcutter bees, who are stem nesting bees, they'll get a chance to emerge.
Excuse me. And can you explain that mowing every 3 years?
Sure. So,
mow every year.
so you would, this is the 4th year and later, if your meadow is very healthy and you've been staying on top of things and you're willing to continue to stay on top of things, you can split your meadow into thirds. So have a section A, section B, section C. So the first year in April, so this would be year 4, you would mow section A. Year 5, you would mow section B. Year 6, section C. And you would keep going through that pattern so that each section was mowed every 3 years. Here are some great resources. Owen Wormser has a book, Lawns into Meadows, really nice a book that kind of covers everything. Heather Holm, incredible. She's done so much to educate people, including myself, about pollinators and native plant pollinator interactions. She has some great books, including Bees, an Identification and Native Plant Forage Guide, Wasp. I know a lot of people are scared of wasps, but there are some beautiful solitary wasps. If you are fearful of wasps, I highly recommend that you check out that book. Pollinators of Native Plants is also a really good one. SUNY ESF, the State University of New York Environmental Science and Forestry. They have a Converting Lawns to Meadows pocket guide. Yes, we are talking about Central New York, and that's who their audience is. So some of the information, especially in terms of timing, isn't going to apply to the Delmarva. However, there's a lot of great information in that booklet that does. And Siobhan can certainly share this information, especially this link. I don't think there's any need for you to like write it down.
Okay.
Right?
Yep, I can get the presentations online
Yeah,
within.
so that, yeah, that way you don't have to like, yeah. And I should also mention, we have a small booklet, which I brought today, about converting lawns to meadows. It is on the table there and it'll stay there.
And those are also on the Nanticoke Watershed Alliance's website.
Yes, if you go to nanticokeriver.org, you go to our publication section, there's also a PDF version of that. Any questions? Yes.
This all was great information, and I'm assuming it really applies to a homeowner's individual property. I don't know about anybody else here in the room, but I'm here from an HOA association.
Same here.
Okay.
But some of them have,
We very much would like to begin to, approach this topic.
Sure.
Has there been any experience or are there any tips that you have to present this kind of a concept to an HOA where
Can I get
everybody
some
loves their lawns?
buy-in.
Like this.
So, yeah, HOAs are always tricky, and I think, education is certainly part of it. But you're simply gonna have people who think if it's not a lawn, I don't wanna see it.
Yeah.
So it depends on your HOA and how big it is, how many residents, how many people are you having to convince?
Right.
And again, one thing that you may want to do is perhaps look at some of those shorter nativars where you could do a smaller meadow that just contains smaller plants. And so I guess what I would do would be, what is the problem, right? That would be the first, what's the obstacle? What's the barrier? What are people worried about? And then you can address those things through education and also choice.
And, I'm sorry,
No, go
I just had one additional question. So you did mention that meadows, I believe, are less costly
Oh, yes.
than maintaining grass. And
Sure.
to me, dollars and cents is what an HOA is gonna, be
Yes.
very interested in. Is there any research available that says, okay, if you do a meadow that's this size versus having it just being open space grass, what are the reasons?
I can't give you a specific, they're actually that SUNY ESF booklet might actually have that included. But I think if you just Google,
Okay.
I think you would be able to find that information pretty quickly because, yeah, that's a common thing to show. Here's how it drills down. Let's get practical and real. Here's what the numbers look like. If we continue to have a lawn and we're paying for a lawn surface to come in, however, people are still mowing now and it's November. However many months, 9 months a year versus you have somebody come in once a year, once this is established, and you just do your maintenance mow.
Okay.
And if it's a smaller meadow, it really depends on the size. That's something you could actually, if it's a smaller meadow and you have a team of people, you could actually hand weed that. depending on the size.
We have old people, so I don't know. if that's-
So just mow it then. Make your life easier, just mow it.
I would say, I've got a couple questions in the chat, but I wanted to kind of go off of your point. So like your community is interested in converting these grass areas to the meadows.
Some.
There is one community that I'm aware of, and there could be others. And it's Tower Hill and
Yeah.
Lewis.
Yes.
So
Oh,
they
Tower Hill,
started
yes.
from the beginning,
Mhm.
and they're already a
Yeah.
National Wildlife certified
I'm very excited.
habitat.
So maybe you could do a
You can
tour
use
with
them
them.
as like an example, like you can
Yeah.
still be wildlife friendly and have an aesthetically pleasing community.
Yes.
And I'm very excited because we are now transitioning over to the pond company that did Tower Hill. So.
Oh, excellent.
Um,
Tower Hill.
Tower Hill.
Yes,
on
Tower.
New Road and.
It's on New Road.
Yep.
It's that
So
new-
there's two questions in the chat. I don't want to take up too much time because we will have some more time at the end for
Sure.
questions, because we still have Darren's
Yes.
presentation.
Yes.
So somebody says they currently have an acre of grass,
Okay.
which is really predominantly nutsedge and white clover. Clover is nice, but the nutsedge is awful. I strive to go organic, but how can I best convert to a meadow in regards to the nutsedge? I have both varieties here. It might be best, maybe they reach out to you after, or maybe point them in a direction for
Yeah,
resources.
and I know organic, I hear you, but I would say in the case of nutsedge, it's not a good idea to till certain things, and nutsedge would be one of them. And with an acre, one thing you could do would be to put it into those bite-sized chunks.
So
do-
convert a smaller section,
do a-
solarize
yes.
it, and then.
Yes,
and then keep.
and that's really, if you don't want to use an herbicide, because really, even if it's like horticultural vinegar, that's rough stuff, y'all. You know, you need to protect yourself, even though it's organic. And if you don't want to do that, then yeah, I would do solarization in the smaller, just bite-sized chunks.
And then Judy was asking, if you mow 3 or 4 times the first year, does it pay to use annual native seeds such as partridge pea as your cover crop? They probably wouldn't flower and reseed.
I wouldn't use partridge pea as a cover crop, but partridge pea is included a lot of times in mixes, and it's actually, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but partridge pea can be this tall and still have pods on it. Don't underestimate certain plants. And tick seeds are also really good at that. Have you ever seen a tick seed that is, you know, like 4 or 5 inches tall and it flowers and seeds? A lot of these annuals and biennials, quick growing plants, they can take a lot of abuse. They're not fiddly. Partridge pea, you should still have partridge peas after that first year.
All right. Let's see, I will start pulling up here. Oh, another question?
I do have one
Okay.
more. So I'm part of an HOA as well, and we were successful developing a corner into
Okay.
a meadow,
Nice.
but it's right in the middle of the development. And frankly, it looks unkempt at
Okay.
the moment. Are there, I think it would be good PR for us to have some really nice signs
Oh,
that
absolutely.
say this is a conservation area.
We have them.
We can have them for free.
They're not very expensive.
No, they're not expensive.
They're not very.
And are they available right here, right
They
now?
are.
Wow, there you go.
And are they
And we
nice
have-
looking?
We have a QR code on it. You know what? We will, since I've got people here virtually too, we will hop out of this and I will show you our website over on this tab, and I will show you
And
the
I'm gonna
sign.
go ahead and sit down, but I'll be here through the end if there are questions at
So,
the end.
In our online store, and I would say our virtual people are also here.
Thank you.
Those-
So this is our new one. And it has a QR code. So if somebody's walking by it, let's say in your community, like they're walking their dog, they're like, what is this? Like, they can scan that.
Wow.
And then- So that QR code will take you to And this part of our website is under construction, so we are expanding it. So as we see people maybe having questions, we'll put some information up here. But, you know, we are defining a conservation area in an urban area as these types of things. And then you can do the benefits. And then we also have an estimated nutrient reduction. So you were talking about the cost reductions of converting from lawn to meadow. This is showing nutrient reductions based on converting 1 acre of grass into a meadow condition. So you look up your soil type and it tells you the solids, the nitrogen, and the phosphorus, what you can expect to find. And then we've got a link to that. You can find your soil type. We gotta just turn on a layer here for our soils in Sussex. And then we have to zoom in a little more. We'll find our office here. Maybe one more. There we go. And we're gonna turn our transparency down a little bit. Okay. So we can see the different soil types. We got A, and we explain what these letters mean. And there is tons of information online with these. But you have to zoom into a certain level for them to work. But where are we? Trap Pond, we're south a little bit. I think we are right around here. So you can see we've got a pretty well-drained area here, but there are pockets of not such well-drained stuff right around us. So it's important to look up your soil type. But yeah, all of that is through that QR code on that sign.
Nice. I like that.